My parents knew my wife was sleeping with my brother and helped her hide it. When I confronted them, Mom said, "They're soulmates. Be happy for them." I smiled, handed them an envelope, and left. Minutes later, my wife called, screaming and begging me to come back. All right, Reddit, get ready for the absolute shit show you're about to hear. But before we get into that, you need to know what I thought my life looked like 10 months ago. I'm Lucian, 32 male, senior logistics coordinator at a mid-sized shipping company making decent money, like 78,000 before taxes. Solid career, steady paycheck, respect from colleagues who don't mind that I sometimes smell like coffee and stress sweat. Been married to Victoria for 7 years. She's 29, works in pharmaceutical sales, and when we met at some crappy happy hour downtown, she had this confidence that made her stand out from the usual crowd. We weren't some Instagram couple, but I thought we had our stuff together. She was building her career, I was building mine, and we were both grinding towards something bigger. I'd been busting my ass for years, working overtime and side gigs on weekends, slowly building up our savings to buy a house in the suburbs with a decent yard and maybe space for kids someday. Every extra dollar went into that fund. I'm talking about skipping guys' night, packing sad desk lunches while my coworkers grabbed takeout, driving my beat-up car while she got the newer Honda CR-V, all for this plan we supposedly shared. Then there's my younger brother Pierce, 27, family golden boy, the smooth talker, the charming screw-up who just needed to find his path, man. The guy was always bouncing between wannabe DJ, aspiring personal trainer, crypto day trader, amateur photographer. You name the hustle, he tried it for 3 months before getting bored and moving on. And here's where I was the biggest sucker in this whole story. Despite everything, despite him borrowing money he never paid back and flaking on every commitment, I had his back. When he needed help, I was there. Got him warehouse gigs through my network when his credit was too shot to get approved for anything better than a bus pass. Co-signed for his car. When he was short on rent, which was basically every month, I'd cover it without making it weird. That's what family does, right? Dad's a retired mechanic. Mom worked at the post office until she took early retirement last year. They raised us with this whole family first, blood runs thicker than water nonsense. Victoria and Pierce had always been tight. Too tight, looking back. They'd text constantly, like more than she texted me some days. She'd laugh at his jokes like he was Dave Chappelle instead of a 27-year-old man-child who still thought that's what she said was peak comedy. He always found reasons to swing by when I was at work or traveling, always with some nonsense excuse. But I figured that was just family dynamics. She was my wife, he was my brother. Why the hell would I think anything else? Right, there was everything else actually. The first real crack showed up about 9 months ago. Victoria started getting different, not dramatic, just off in a way I couldn't put my finger on. She'd flip her phone face down when I walked into a room. Started dressing up for girls' nights that seemed to happen every other week. When I'd ask about her day, her answers got shorter and more vague. The suspicion started small, the kind of thing you tell yourself you're paranoid about because the alternative is too messed up to consider. Pierce started showing up more often, always with some excuse that sounded reasonable until you really thought about it. Needed tools for what project? Wanted to use our internet for what exactly? Had to drop off what thing that couldn't wait until the weekend? The timing was weird too. He'd show up 20 minutes after I'd leave for the airport on business trips. But the phone calls were what really started eating at me. I'd walk into a room and catch Victoria talking in these low, intimate tones that she hadn't used with me in months. Then she'd quickly wrap up with "gotta go, talk later" when she saw me. When I'd ask who it was, she'd brush me off with obvious lies that got lazier by the week. The breaking point came during a 4-day business trip to Phoenix in March. Something felt off when I left. Victoria seemed almost eager for me to hit the road, kissing me goodbye like she was relieved instead of sad, practically pushing me out the door. On impulse, I stopped at Best Buy and grabbed one of those small wireless security cameras. Told myself I was just being paranoid, that I needed peace of mind about home security while I was gone, that it was probably nothing. I set it up in the living room, tucked behind some books on the shelf with a decent view of the kitchen and front door. Connected it to an app on my phone. Thought I'd probably never even check the damn thing. I was dead wrong. On day 2 of my trip, during a lunch break, I opened the app. What I saw made me want to puke all over my sad desk salad. There was Victoria in our kitchen, wrapped around Pierce. They were going at it, full on making out. The timestamp showed it was just 3 hours after she texted me, "Miss you, baby," counting down till you're home. 3 hours. The worst part? How comfortable they were. Pierce had a key. When the hell had she given him a key? He moved around our house like he owned the place, acting like the man of the house while I was away, working to pay for the life we'd supposedly built together. I sat in that sterile conference room, surrounded by colleagues, and watched my entire world fall apart. 7 years of marriage, a lifetime of brotherhood, all BS. I didn't confront them right away. Spent the rest of that business trip in a weird fog, going through the motions while my brain tried to process what I'd seen. When I got home Thursday night, I played it cool while I figured out my next move. Made copies of the footage to 3 different cloud storage accounts, screenshotted the timestamps, and started paying closer attention to their behavior around each other. Once I knew what to look for, the signs were everywhere. I spent 3 weeks gathering more evidence, installing additional cameras, and documenting their schedules. Pierce was coming over every Tuesday and Thursday when I was at my standing meetings. Victoria had been lying about working late. I called her office and found out she'd been leaving early those days. The web of lies was so detailed. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I cornered Victoria in our bedroom on a Sunday morning, phone ready with the footage queued up. "I know," I said, showing her the screen. She stared at it for maybe 10 seconds, her face going through shock, panic, and then anger. Not shame, not guilt. Anger. "You put a camera in our house?" she snapped, like I was the one in the wrong. "My house," I corrected. "How long?" She broke down then, but not the way you'd expect. More like she was pissed she got caught than sorry about what she did. "It wasn't supposed to happen, Lucian. We didn't plan it. You're never here anyway, always working or on those stupid trips, and Pierce was just there for me when I needed someone." But then she stopped crying and looked at me like I was the problem. "You're being dramatic," she said. "It's not like we meant to hurt you. Sometimes things just happen between people. You wouldn't understand. You've never been passionate about anything except saving money." I felt like she'd slapped me across the face. Here was my wife of 7 years, caught red-handed with my brother, acting like I was overreacting for being upset about it. "We're telling your family," I said. "This affects everyone." She nodded, but something in her face made me suspicious. "Yeah, okay. We should tell them together. They deserve to know the truth." I called my parents that afternoon, told them to come over and bring Pierce. Said we needed to have a family discussion about something important. When they showed up 2 hours later with Pierce trailing behind, I knew something was up. They all looked ready for something. "Mom, Dad," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk." My mother held up her hand. "Lucian, honey, we already know." The words hit me. "You what?" "We've known for months," Dad said, not meeting my eyes, staring at his hands. "We were hoping you'd figure it out yourself and handle it maturely." I looked around the room at my parents, my wife, and my brother. They were all staring at me with expressions ranging from pity to impatience. Nobody looked ashamed. Nobody looked sorry. They looked like they were waiting for me to finish throwing my tantrum so they could move on with their day. "How long have you all known?" I asked, my voice getting quieter. "Since February," Pierce said, speaking up for the first time since he'd arrived. He had his arm around Victoria's waist now, right there in my living room. "We tried to fight it, Lucian. But you can't fight real love." "Real love," I repeated slowly. "They're meant to be, Lucian," my mother said. "You've always had trouble with relationships. Maybe it's time to let this one go and find someone more compatible." My father nodded along. "Son, you need to be mature about this. They're happy. Don't you want them to be happy?" I looked at Victoria, who was now holding Pierce's hand. "So this whole meeting, this was your big reveal? You all planned this?" "We thought it would be easier this way," she said with a shrug. "Keep it in the family. A clean transition." "Your birthday seemed perfect," Pierce added with a smirk. "New year, fresh start for everyone." My sister Jenna, who'd been quiet until now, finally spoke up. "Maybe you two just weren't compatible, Lucian. Everything happens for a reason, right?" I stood there, surrounded by my entire family, being told I should be happy about my wife sleeping with my brother, that I was being childish for being hurt, that I should just accept it and move on because they were meant to be. For a second, I thought I might lose it completely. But then something clicked. This cold calm washed over me, and I found myself smiling. "You know what?" I said, my voice steady for the first time all night. "You're absolutely right. I should be happy for you both." Relief flooded their faces. Victoria actually looked satisfied. "I'm so glad you're being reasonable about this, Lucian. This doesn't have to change anything between us. We can still be family." "Not at all," I agreed, reaching into my jacket. "In fact, I have something for each of you." I pulled out 3 thick manila envelopes I'd prepared earlier and handed them out. One to Victoria, one to my parents, one to Pierce. "What's this?" Mom asked. "Just some paperwork," I said, still smiling. Nothing urgent. You can read it when you get home. You're leaving? Victoria asked. And for the first time all night, she looked worried. Well, you're right about fresh starts and all that. I should give you two lovebirds some space to figure out your new living situation. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Oh, and Pierce? You might want to move your car. I'm reporting it stolen in about an hour. I walked out to the sound of envelopes being ripped open behind me, got in my car, and drove away. I was 2 blocks away when my phone started blowing up. The first call came from Victoria. Let it ring. Second call 30 seconds later, then another. By the time I got to the Holiday Inn Express I'd booked across town, not exactly the Ritz, but it had clean sheets and nobody was sleeping with my brother in it. I had 27 missed calls and a screen full of texts. Victoria's first voicemail was a masterpiece. Lucien, please, you can't do this to me. Come back right now. We can work this out. Please, I'm begging you. Her voice was shaking with rage and panic. But my mother's message really got to me. Her voice was shaking with pure fury. Lucien James Parker, you get back here right now. This is not how we raised you. Family doesn't destroy family like this. Your father and I are very disappointed. Right. I deleted the rest without listening and ordered a pizza. Here's the thing, fellas. I'd spent the last 3 months preparing for this exact moment. The day I caught their little kitchen production, something inside me didn't break down. It got ice cold and calculating. I'd been documenting everything, planning everything, talking to lawyers and financial advisors, waiting for the perfect moment to show them exactly how much I was worth to them. And they'd handed me that moment gift-wrapped with a bow. The envelopes contained, for Victoria, divorce papers already signed and notarized by me. A postnup she'd signed 3 years back when we had some trust issues over her spending. She'd completely forgotten about it, but it clearly stated that in case of adultery, she forfeited her claim to the house and most of our shared assets. An eviction notice giving her 30 days to get out of the house that was solely in my name. And photos, dozens of them, showing her and Pierce in various compromising positions throughout our house over the past month. For my parents, copies of all my evidence, including video footage, text screenshots, and financial records showing how I'd been bankrolling Pierce's existence while he was sleeping with my wife in my house. A formal letter cutting off my financial support for their mortgage. I'd been covering $800 of their monthly payment since Dad retired. Cancellation of the family cell plan I'd been paying for, that covered all 4 of us. For Pierce, the real surprise. Legal documents showing that the 2019 Honda Civic he'd been driving was registered in my name. I'd never transferred the title after co-signing because his credit was still terrible. Keys were with my lawyer, and I'd already reported it stolen since he no longer had my permission to drive it. A formal demand for repayment of all loans I'd given him over the years, itemized with dates and interest, totaling just over $23,400, and a notice that I'd provided his probation officer with evidence of his recent activities, apparently sleeping with his brother's wife while living in said brother's house, violated several conditions of his probation from a fight I'd helped him beat 2 years back. But the real genius was what I'd done in the months leading up to this. I'd quietly separated our finances, moving my direct deposits to a new account and leaving just enough in the joint checking to cover mortgage and utilities so Victoria wouldn't notice. I'd transferred the house deed into a trust that Victoria couldn't touch legally. I'd documented every penny Pierce owed me going back 5 years and every time my parents had asked for money while knowing about the affair. Most importantly, I'd been recording everything since I got suspicious. The security system I'd installed wasn't just that one camera. There were audio pickups throughout the house now. Every time Victoria brought Pierce over, every conversation they'd had about me, every cruel joke at my expense, every plan they made for their future. I had it all saved. Around 1 a.m., barely 4 hours after I'd walked out, hotel security called my room. Mr. Parker, we have a woman in the lobby claiming to be your wife. She's very upset and demanding to see you. Says it's a family emergency. I could hear Victoria screaming in the background. Lucien, I know you're here. Just talk to me for 5 minutes. You're being insane. Tell her I'm not available, I told security. If she won't go, call the cops. The next morning brought a flood of messages that painted a picture of total chaos. Victoria had apparently gone back to my parents' house around 2 a.m., alternating between hysterical crying and screaming about how I was ruining everyone's lives over nothing. Pierce had tried to calm her down by saying they could get through this together, which backfired when Victoria turned on him. This is your fault, she'd screamed, according to a voice message Jenna left me. If you hadn't pushed to tell him, we could have figured something else out. Now he's trying to destroy all of us. Pierce had stormed out, leaving Victoria sobbing on my parents' couch, while they tried to figure out how to handle the legal and financial crisis I'd just dropped on their heads. My mother left me 15 voicemails that night. By number 10, she was crying. By number 13, she was threatening to call my boss. By 15, she was begging me to come home so we could work this out as a family. But the real drama was just getting started. When I discovered the affair, I didn't just gather evidence. I'd spent weeks talking to lawyers, financial advisors, and a private investigator named Rita, who specialized in infidelity cases. She'd been worth every penny of the $5,000 I'd paid for her services. Most people think affairs are just about the sex, she told me during our first meeting in her cluttered office that smelled like stale coffee and cigarettes. But there's usually a whole web of lies around them. Financial, social, professional. Affairs don't happen in a vacuum, Lucian. They're usually part of a bigger pattern of deception. She was dead right. Through Rita's investigation, I learned that Victoria and Pierce hadn't just been having an affair. They'd been planning an entire future together. They had a joint savings account I'd never known about. Funded by money Victoria had been slowly skimming from our shared account for 6 months. We're talking $400 to $500 at a time, always with explanations that sounded reasonable. Emergency car repair, medical bills, helping my sister with rent. All lies. They'd been apartment hunting together in the nicer part of town. They'd been talking about when to file for divorce, how to break it to me gently, and even discussing what story to tell our mutual friends to make me look like the bad guy. Most damning of all, they'd been talking to a lawyer about their options. Not a divorce lawyer, a real estate lawyer. They'd been exploring whether they could claim common law marriage rights to our house if they could prove they'd been living together long enough while I was traveling for work. The consultation notes Rita obtained through her connections showed they'd been planning to gaslight me into thinking I was paranoid and controlling while they established legal residency in my own house. Then they'd claim I was emotionally abusive and try to get a restraining order that would force me out of my own home. That's when I realized this wasn't just betrayal. It was a calculated heist designed to steal my life from the inside out. But 4 weeks after the confrontation, my college roommate Tommy called with something that made my blood freeze. "Lucian, I need to ask you something straight up," he said, and I could hear the concern in his voice. "Are you losing your mind? Like, mentally?" "What the hell are you talking about, Tommy? Your brother Pierce hit me up last week through Facebook. Said you'd been having some kind of breakdown, and your family was worried about you." My hands clenched into fists. "He what?" Over the next few days, I discovered that Pierce and my parents had been calling my friends, co-workers, and acquaintances, painting me as mentally unstable and asking them to document any concerning behavior they'd witnessed. They were building a case to have me committed. My work buddy Carlos called. "Lucien, I got this weird call from some guy claiming to be your brother. Was asking about your work performance, whether you'd seemed stressed or aggressive lately. Wanted to know if you'd ever talked about hurting anyone. My gym partner, Mike. Some lady saying she was your mom called the gym asking if you'd been acting violent during workouts." The most chilling call came from my former therapist, Dr. Morell, who I'd seen briefly 3 years back during a rough patch at work. "Lucian, I got a very disturbing call from your mother. She was asking about our sessions and whether I'd noted any signs of potential violence or mental instability." "Dr. Morell, I haven't talked to my mother about therapy in years. What exactly did she say?" "She claimed you were having paranoid delusions about your wife cheating and that the family was worried you might hurt yourself or someone else. She wanted to know if I thought you needed an involuntary psychiatric hold and asked if I'd be willing to testify about your mental state." That conversation led me to make a discovery that shook me to my core. I called Dr. Morrison, the psychiatrist my mother had mentioned in some text messages Rita had recovered from Victoria's cloud backup. "Mr. Parker, yes, I've been expecting your call. Your family has provided extensive documentation about your deteriorating mental state. They're very concerned about your well-being and the safety of others." "What kind of documentation?" "Well, your mother and brother have recorded several incidents of paranoid behavior, accusations against your wife, and obsessive surveillance of her activities. They've documented threats of violence, property damage, stalking behavior. They're worried you might be developing some form of delusional disorder or even early-stage schizophrenia. They'd already built the case. They had evidence of my paranoid behavior that was actually evidence of me discovering their affair. They'd been recording my confrontations with them, editing the recordings to remove context, and using them as proof I was losing my mind. The most chilling part was a message Rita had recovered from my father's phone. "Lucian always trusts family completely. He'll never see this coming until it's too late." They were right. I never would have seen it coming in a million years. The day after I discovered their psychiatric manipulation scheme, my phone rang from a number I recognized. My grandpa Rufus, Dad's old man. Lucian, I owe you an apology, he said without any pleasantries. His voice was gravelly from 60 years of cigarettes and construction work. I had no idea what they were doing to you. Your father called me this morning, begging me not to reach out, practically panicking, and that's when I knew something was seriously messed up. What do you mean? He told me you were overreacting to Victoria and Pierce's friendship, that you were being vindictive and trying to destroy the family over nothing. But the way he said it, Lucian, I've known your father for 55 years, and I've never heard him sound that panicked. What really happened? So I told him everything. When I finished, there was dead silence for almost a full minute. Jesus Christ, he finally whispered. Son, I'm sorry. I always thought there was something off about how they treated you compared to Pierce, but I never imagined. Look, I got a cabin up north. It's yours as long as you need it, and I'm calling every person in this family to tell them what really happened. That started the second wave of consequences that spread through our family. Within 48 hours of Grandpa making his calls, the extended family was buzzing with information I hadn't even known about myself. My cousin Isabel called with the first bomb. Lucian, I need to tell you something that's been eating at me. Last month, when you were on that business trip to Atlanta, your mom called asking if I could cover for Victoria if anyone asked where she was. Cover for her how? She told me Victoria was going to some kind of couples retreat with Pierce to help work through family issues, and that if you called asking about her whereabouts, I should say she was with me having a girls' weekend. Made it sound like they were planning some kind of intervention or surprise for you. That revelation led to discovering an entire network of lies my family had been maintaining to cover the affair. Jenna had been asked to provide alibis for family planning meetings that were actually hookup sessions. My Aunt Carmen had been told Pierce was helping Victoria with a surprise home renovation project. Even our 70-year-old neighbor, Mrs. Garcia, had been recruited. My mother told her Pierce was doing handyman work around the house and asked her not to mention it because it was supposed to be a surprise for my birthday. The web of deception was impressive, but the revelation that broke me came from my cousin Ronan, who worked IT for a big tech company and knew his way around digital forensics. Lucien, sit down for this, he said when he called me at the hotel. Rufus asked me to dig into some of the tech stuff in your evidence file. I've been going through those cloud backups Rita pulled, and I found something you missed. What? Group chat screenshots. Screenshots of text conversations between Victoria, Pierce, and your parents, but also screenshots of conversations with other people. They weren't just planning to have you committed, Lucian. They were planning to take over your entire life. The screenshots Ronan sent me were worse than anything I could have imagined. My own family discussing me like I was a problem to be eliminated, rather than a person being destroyed. Mom, when Lucian finds out, he's gonna lose his mind. He's always been unstable when things don't go his way. Pierce, I've been documenting some of his controlling behavior with Victoria. Phone calls where he sounds paranoid, stuff like that. We might need it for court. Victoria, he's been so suspicious lately. Borderline stalker behavior. We can definitely use that to show he's dangerous. Mom, Doctor, Morrison said if we can show a pattern, we can probably get a 72-hour psychiatric hold for evaluation. Pierce, then what? He gets out in 3 days and comes after us with a shotgun? Mom, not if we can prove he's a danger to himself and others. If he's declared mentally incompetent, I can take control of his finances and property until he's stable. Dad, the house alone is worth $280,000, plus his 401k in savings. Victoria, and I'd still be his wife legally until the divorce goes through, which means I'd have access to everything. Reading those messages felt like knives in my chest. Armed with this new evidence, my lawyer filed additional motions that changed the entire scope of the case. We weren't just seeking divorce and debt repayment anymore. We were documenting a criminal conspiracy that could have resulted in felony charges for everyone involved. Within 48 hours, I'd heard from cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends who'd been getting panicked calls from my parents trying to control the narrative. But Rufus had been busy too, and the real truth was spreading faster than their BS version could keep up. The annual family reunion scheduled for July was canceled when half the family said they wouldn't show up if my parents were there. Rufus called me that evening with news that changed everything. Lucian, I want you to know something. I've been thinking about this situation, and I need to tell you what I've decided. I'm changing my will. Your father was supposed to inherit the trucking business when I die, but after what he's done to you, I can't leave it to him. I want you to have it instead. I was stunned. Grandpa owned a successful freight company that employed 23 people and pulled in serious revenue, worth real money. Grandpa, I don't know anything about trucking. No, but you understand logistics. The business needs fresh blood anyway, and you're the only person in this family I trust to run it. For the first time since discovering the affair, I felt like I had something to build toward, instead of just something to escape from. Meanwhile, the consequences kept piling up for everyone else. Pierce had been arrested for driving without a valid license after his got suspended for violating probation terms. He was now looking at potential jail time and had moved back in with my parents, who were struggling to make their mortgage payments without my monthly $800 contribution. Victoria had moved in with them too, since she couldn't afford her own place after getting fired from her sales job. Turns out her company had strict policies about personal conduct, and when word got around about her affair, small towns love gossip, several clients requested new account reps. Her boss decided she was no longer a good fit for the company culture. According to Jenna, who was the only family member still talking to me, the living situation was a complete disaster. They're at each other's throats constantly, Jenna told me during one of our weekly calls. Pierce blames Victoria for pushing too hard too fast. Victoria blames Pierce for not being able to support her financially like you did. Mom and Dad are barely speaking because Dad thinks Mom pushed this whole thing too hard and too fast. What do you mean Mom pushed it? Apparently, she's the one who encouraged Victoria to follow her heart when the affair first started. Dad went along with it, but he never really believed it would work out. Now he's saying Mom destroyed the family for nothing. The irony was perfect. The woman who'd orchestrated my betrayal was now getting blamed by everyone. But it wasn't over yet. My lawyer had been building a case that went way beyond simple divorce proceedings and debt collection. With the evidence I'd gathered, including the psychiatric manipulation scheme, he'd gotten the district attorney interested in potential fraud charges related to the misuse of marital assets and conspiracy to commit false imprisonment. I had to make a choice. Did I want to pursue criminal charges that could send them all to prison? Or was the civil case enough to make my point? I could destroy them completely, or I could take what I needed to rebuild and walk away clean. I chose the middle path, mostly. File the civil suits for everything we can get, I told him. I want every penny Pierce owes me, plus damages and interest. I want Victoria to understand that actions have real-world consequences. But I don't want to send anyone to prison unless they force my hand. You sure? With the evidence you have, we could probably get significant jail time for all of them, especially your mother and Pierce. I'm sure. I don't want to become the kind of man who destroys people out of spite. I just want them to understand they can't do what they did and walk away like nothing happened. But there was one more surprise waiting that changed my perspective entirely. 5 days after that conversation, I got a text from an unknown number with a screenshot attached. It was from a mutual friend who'd somehow gotten pulled into the drama through Facebook connections and small-town gossip networks. The screenshot was from a group chat between Victoria, Pierce, and my mother, dated 9 months earlier, before I discovered anything. Mom, I think Lucian is getting suspicious about you two. You need to be more careful or find a way to handle him. Pierce, he's too trusting and too busy with work to figure it out. Guy's clueless about everything that isn't on a spreadsheet. Victoria, I feel guilty sometimes. But honestly, he's so focused on work and that stupid house fund, he barely pays attention to me anymore. Mom, maybe you two are meant to be together. Lucian has always been emotionally distant anyway. Even as a kid, he cared more about his projects and achievements than connecting with people. Mom, Lucian hates confrontation and drama. He'll probably just accept it and move on rather than fight about it. Victoria, God, I hope so. I can't keep pretending to be happy much longer. This whole situation is exhausting. Reading those messages was like getting gut-punched all over again. My own mother had been actively encouraging my wife to cheat with my brother while trying to figure out how to get away with it. That screenshot became the final nail in the coffin. I forwarded it to my lawyer. I sent it to Grandpa, who shared it with the rest of the extended family. And then, in a moment of what was probably petty revenge but felt like justice, I posted it to our family group chat, the one that included all our cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends. The response was immediate and brutal. Family members started removing my parents and Pierce from the group chat one by one. Relatives who'd been neutral or trying to stay out of it suddenly picked sides. 5 weeks later, the final shoe dropped, but it came from a direction I never expected. It's been 14 months now since that birthday party that changed everything. I'm writing this from my new office in Denver, where Rufus's trucking business has expanded into full-scale logistics and freight management. We just landed a major contract with a national retailer to handle their Western distribution network, and I'm actually excited about work for the first time in years. Samantha and I have been together for 8 months now, and she moved in with me last month. She's met Rufus, who has become the father figure I needed after cutting ties with my parents. I still talk to Jenna occasionally. She's the only member of my biological family I have any contact with, and even that's limited and carefully managed. She tells me my mother has basically had a complete mental breakdown. The woman who'd spent months orchestrating elaborate schemes to manipulate everyone around her apparently couldn't handle the consequences. Pierce served 16 months for multiple theft and fraud charges. According to Jenna, he blames everyone but himself for his situation. He's apparently convinced that he's the real victim in this entire situation. Victoria is struggling as a single mother. She is barely keeping it together financially or emotionally. She's been working retail jobs that barely cover rent and daycare, living in a one-bedroom apartment across town from our old neighborhood. She's been asking Jenna to pass along messages, begging me to consider helping her get back on her feet for old time's sake. I declined, firmly and permanently. Victoria has been telling people around town that I was abusive during our marriage, that I was controlling and paranoid, and that the affair was her way of escaping. She's rewritten history to make herself the victim and me the villain. Doesn't matter anymore. The people who know me know better. 6 weeks ago, my phone rang. Prison call. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Lucian, it's Pierce. Don't hang up, brother. Just give me 5 minutes. His voice sounded different. You've got 2 minutes, I said. Look, I've had a lot of time to think about what happened, and I realize we all made some serious mistakes. I know you're probably still pissed, but we're family. Family should stick together no matter what. I get out in 4 months, and when I do, I'd like us to try to rebuild our relationship. Mistakes, I repeated slowly. That's what you're calling it. Come on, Lucian. Things got complicated with Victoria, but that's in the past now. We can start over. Put this whole thing behind us. I heard you're doing really well with Rufus's business. There it was. The real reason for the call. He'd been keeping tabs on me and my success. Actually, Pierce, speaking of Rufus, I let the silence stretch for a few seconds. He told me something interesting last week. Apparently, you called him about 7 months ago. Tried to convince him that I was lying about what happened between you and Victoria. Told him I was mentally unstable and that the family was worried about me becoming violent. The silence on the other end was deafening. Here's the thing, though, I continued, keeping my voice completely flat and emotionless. Rufus recorded that call. Every word. And you know what happened after he played it for me? He didn't just give me the business in his will. He signed the entire company over to me immediately. All of it. The trucks, the contracts, the property, the bank accounts. Lucian, I'm not finished talking. Your little phone call to Rufus? It wasn't just recorded. Rufus sent a copy to my lawyer and to the district attorney's office. Turns out trying to defame someone to interfere with their business relationships while you're incarcerated adds some interesting charges to your record. Your parole hearing got pushed back by at least 6 months. The phone went completely quiet except for the sound of his breathing getting faster and more panicked. So, I want to thank you, little brother. Every time you try to mess with me, my life gets better. Every time you think you're playing chess, you're actually handing me more pieces. Please, keep trying. I'm curious to see how much higher you can push my net worth. You can't keep doing this to me, he finally whispered. You're doing it to yourself. You just called from prison to ask for forgiveness, while simultaneously trying to poison my business relationships with lies. That's who you are. That's who you've always been. And that's why you're in prison while I'm running a multi-million-dollar company. I hung up and blocked the number. Some bridges are worth rebuilding. Others need to stay burned to ash. Because here's the thing. The affair was a gut punch. But discovering that my entire family saw me as a resource to be managed, rather than a person to be respected, was worse. Learning that was painful but liberating. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.